Hello, everyone. We're going to talk tonight about two main topics. First, the controversy surrounding the word black in certain organizations, in our award shows, and things of that nature. We're also going to talk about the situation in Flint and a reminder of how people can miss a spiritual signal, but also miss the glaring signals of the absence of those who should be involved. But we're going to start talking right now about the controversy surrounding things like BET and Black History Month and any organization or effort that when the word black is involved, or as an NAACP case, colored people, people automatically assume it to be an unfair term that advances racism in a reverse fashion. Now, we're not going to mention any names. We all know who's been on the rounds talking about BET and Black History Month. That's not important. But we have to clear up the understanding of what BET is. Even though it says Black Entertainment Television, the content is open to all and clearly diverse in what it offers. You look at three prime examples through three of BT's most prolific and memorable shows in terms of ratings and quality. Comic View. You had a white comic who hosted the show. Right along there, Ricky Smiley in that 98, 99, 2000 era when Comic View was in its prime. And you remember how it came on late night on BET. And you had, and Lord forgive me for not knowing his name, you had that white comic who was the host and who was a constant performer there. And other white comics were allowed on BET. And remember, this was a black audience. If I remember correctly, it was a little club in Atlanta, Georgia, if I remember correctly. But that clearly showed that this content is inclusive of all people, not just black people. And so do not mistake a word in the network name for any advocation of racial supremacy or separatism. Then you take BT's highest rated show, at least at the time it was. It was called The Game. The Game featured an actress who had a prominent role, the girl from Sweet Valley High, the blonde girl who has a twin sister. I want to say her name's Brittany Daniels, but again, not sure off the top of my head. And I'm not going to go run to Google or anything right now. I'm talking to you, the audience, and that's more important. But we all know her. I believe her character name was Kelly Pitt. She was married to that footballer, Jason Pitts. She had a prominent role on that show. A blonde-haired white woman had a prominent role on a show on BET. And then probably the most famous example would be Eminem. Eminem is welcome on BET. Eminem is, I believe, won a BET award. I'm certain he's performed at the BET Awards. But he has been embraced by black consumers and the music industry, the minority part of it as a whole. So those are three clear examples that there's nothing racist or racially exclusive about BET. It is clearly racially diverse and offers an option in its content to all people. And it's so ironic people attack BET now when you consider how it's gone downhill and how interesting now for someone to bring it up. But let me give you an example of how just because you don't have a certain word in a title doesn't affect the clear marketing audience and direction and intent of a network and the people that control it. Now, BET has the word black in it, but I've just given you clear examples of that it's diverse in the content it offers. But now look at a channel like CMT. I believe that stands for Country Music Television, if I'm correct off the top of my head. Now, even though the word white isn't in the title, it's very clear when you look at its content. Is there anything that offers diversity in their content? On any of the shows they offer, do you see a black guest on the regular, or do you see a black guest at all on this? Doesn't CMT have an award show? When was the last time a black artist was nominated? Or has there been a black host on the CMT Awards or in any reality show they might be airing? So show me any record of diversity on CMT. I don't believe you'll find it. If I'm wrong, correct me. But again, they are not called out on that for two reasons. A, it's their legal right to have a marketing strategy to the demographic they desire. And B, just because the word white isn't in the title, people automatically assume that their hands are clean. And that's wrong. You have to be very careful about judging something by the strict literal sense or even the figurative sense. Because people look at BET and say, oh, in a figurative way, that's racist because you're saying black entertainment, invoking the word black. But again, literally and figuratively, you've seen content from BET that's offered to all people because whites are on the network. And that's a good thing. I have no problem with that. On CMT, you would be hard pressed to find any content, any show where they have a black or Hispanic or Arabic or Asian contributor to the show on a regular basis, on any show on there, any of the music videos on a regular basis to promote diversity in what they offer. But no one brings that up because the word white isn't in the title. Now, you might talk about NAACP or the Image Award or the Congressional Black Caucus, and again, yeah, it might be a bit controversial to have those types of words in it. But again, you have to be set aside the literal and look at the figurative sense. For a perfect example, I'll give you other examples besides CMT. If you think of the Oath Keepers or the websites like Human Events or World Net Daily or even the KKK or, things of that nature. Now, the word white isn't in any of those things, but I guarantee you, anyone who knows politics and does a lot of internet research and internet surfing, if you know what World Net Daily is, if you know what Human Events is, everyone knows what the KKK is, if you know what the Oath Keepers are, if you know what John Birch Society is, when you think of all those entities, even though white isn't in any of their titles, their agenda and the content they offer is pure 99.9 to pretty much to 100% white owned, white contributors and marketed to white people with a very controversial context and agenda and political, racial, and social positions behind the things they put out, especially World Net Daily and Human Events. Obviously, the KKK is needless to say. But again, because you don't see white in that title, those groups don't get criticized they get criticized. KKK does because of its brutal history. But really, you don't hear people criticizing or calling for, boycotts or calling out of the very controversial things on World Net Daily or Human Events or the Oath Keepers or things of that nature. You don't hear anybody calling them out the same way you hear BET called out because you're so caught up in a literal term, black, automatically assuming that black is an advocacy for, racial exclusion. And it's not, or racial separation. It's just an identifying term. When you turn this channel on, you will see mostly black actors and black actresses. But it's not telling you can't watch it if you're not black. The content is clearly meant for other groups because you have white contributors on BET. You do not have any percentage of, at least I would say to if I'm wrong, goodness, I could not imagine in even half of a right mind that there's any Hispanic, black, or Arabic contributors or Asian contributors to sites like Human Events or World Net Daily or a group like the Oath Keepers or the KKK, which again, needless to say, because you already know what they are. But that teaches you never get too caught up in a word or a term. There's a reason on a job interview they ask you what your race is, or it's listed on your birth certificate, or listed in other aspects of your life. But don't make too much of a term unless you have some agenda behind it. and that's all this is. Understand that it's nothing personal or nothing meant to exclude other people. When you talk about BET or the NAACP or Black History Month or Congressional Black Caucus, it's just a focus on a group of people that have had to rise from very tough circumstances. When you dealt with countless centuries of slavery, brutal beatings, segregation, brutal ways of enforcing that segregation, discrimination, pardon a group for wanting an entity or an organization to represent them. Yeah, maybe in the technical or literal term, it's a bit controversial to say black in a title, to say black in another title, to say colored people in another title. But you look at the extenuating circumstances, and that should override it. The same way any Republican or conservative would want you to look at extenuating circumstances when it comes to something they bring up. When it comes to the Iraq War, they say, oh, look at the extenuating circumstances. What would you have done after 9/11? Or this, that, and the other. Or we had to respond some way. I still don't agree with that because the Iraq War was a full year after 9/11. And that's more than enough time to take your time and think about what you're doing. But the point is, the same way any conservative would ask you to use extenuating circumstances when it comes to subjects that fit their agenda, any reasonable person should look at extenuating circumstances when it comes to the titles like Black Entertainment Television, NAACP, Congressional Black Caucus, so forth and so on, and understand and have an open mind to what they do. And by the way, if you would look at their agenda, nobody in the NAACP or the Congressional Black Caucus, and I've already explained BET, is advocating anything negative towards any other group. It's just advocating the advancement of one group, but not at the expense of another. We're not saying we want the rise of blacks at the expense of whites, or we want the rise of blacks at the expense of Asians, or we want the rise of blacks at the expense of Hispanics or Middle Easterners. Excuse me, Arabic people. I apologize. We're just saying we want our rise. And we're willing to look for legal, constitutional, and moral ideas to bring about that rise, that progression. And I don't see anything wrong with that. And I'm willing to set aside, using extenuating circumstances as the ultimate factor, the controversy that may come with having black or colored in a title of an organization or a channel. But that's just me. Especially when you completely ignore other entities and groups that have a very controversial rhetoric, agenda, and content that they offer, but just because the word white isn't in it, you think that means it should be ignored, and the controversies of their of the material they put out should be ignored, and it shouldn't. The same way people tolerate Human Events, WorldNet Daily, The Oath Keepers, CMT, but the same way they tolerate that, knowing it's clearly marketed towards one group of people, is the same way they should tolerate Black Entertainment Television, the NAACP, the Congressional Black Caucus, Black History Month, so forth and so on. And again, that's not a knock on CMT. There's nothing illegal about liking country music or immoral, but I'm saying, just because you don't have white in the title, don't you dare try to pretend like it's not meant for a white consumer, because it clearly is. It's not marketed to with the purpose or intent of diversity. No one with half a brain could believe it is. It's marketed towards a certain consumer. That's legal. It's constitutional, and I have a problem with that. But don't try to play it off or pretend like it isn't what it is. We know what it is. But again, they are within their rights to do so. But BET is within its legal rights to keep that name, and more importantly, it does its moral duty by including other races in the product and in the content they offer. And that's undeniable fact. I've given you 3 clear examples that can be researched at any time that you like. Now we're going to close with some thoughts on the situation in Flint, Michigan. With this tainted water, poison water, unsanitized drinking water that's unsafe. Ask yourself, this is a national story. This is a crisis. You're going to have people on one side saying, Obama this, Obama that. You're going to have people on another side saying, I believe the governor's name is Snyder. Snyder this, Republicans that. Why do rich, elitist people get away with the destruction of an entire supply of drinking water, but yet they want to throw the book at anyone with a gram of weed or whatever on them. Blah blah blah. You're gonna have two different outlooks on opposite ends of the spectrum on this Flint, Michigan thing. But this is a national crisis. Everyone notice. Have you not seen? And correct me if I'm wrong. I'm open to being corrected. Make me eat crow like it's a delicious 8-course meal. Have you not seen one of these big name preachers head out to Flint or do anything about Flint? They've got all the time in the world for Trinity Broadcasting Network. Again, don't need to say names. You know who they are. Many of them are black. You can think of two right off the top that are black. You have not seen one big name preacher make an effort to go out into Flint. And not just to bring water or offer solutions, but to offer prayer and revival, which is what anyone who knows Flint, Michigan is, if not the one of the most, certainly top 5 dangerous places in America. They have extremely high rates of violent crime, assaults, robbery, murder in terms of percentage, not overall murders, because Flint's a small city. Flint, Michigan might be the most violent and dangerous city in the United States of America. So when I look at this water crisis as a Baptist minister myself, the first thing I can say is, this is God speaking to that city. So if I, someone with not any type of a following, a man who just accepts his calling, a man who lives off meager wage, if I can see God talking to Flint, talking to the people of Flint, isn't it funny how preachers who have private planes, Rolls Royces, airtime on Trinity Broadcasting Network, expensive suits, and live the luxurious life and travel everywhere else in their planes and make time for everywhere else, but they don't have time to go to a predominantly black city where there is a major crisis that can clearly be tied to a spiritual message that God wants that city to see. If not just for a day of prayer, along with what solutions or donations they can offer, since they got money for everything else. Not one of those big name preachers who got these mega churches out near Flint. You think about that. You think about Matthew chapter 24. I'm not going to tell you the exact verse, but you need to read all of the Bible, or all of a chapter of the Bible. If you don't have enough time to read Matthew chapter 24, you need to reprioritize your life. So I ask you tonight, say a prayer for Flint. Ask God to touch their hearts. Ask the people to open their hearts and their minds to the living God. Ask them to repent. Pray that they see the need to repent, and then their voice shall be heard by God. He will show grace and mercy upon that city again. But you have to call on his name and be willing to turn from your wicked ways if you want the grace and mercy of the living God. You can't just say it. You got to live it. I honestly, truly believe that. God bless you all. Please remember to pray for Flint. Pray for every area. God can affect all, and he expects all of his people to pray for one another. It's a duty. It should be a desire for believers, but it's a duty. So I hope you take care of that tonight when you get on your knees and speak to the Almighty.